morning, Jimmy. This is John Richardson speaking with you from Toronto, Canada. Today is Thursday, November the 12th, 2020. Renunciations are still in the news, and more specifically, the problem of getting an appointment to renounce U.S. citizenship. I've done a number of sessions on renunciation generally, and this is sort of an update, a check-in. And my guest this morning is Jimmy Sexton, who does expatriation work as part of his general tax advisory, wealth management, and planning practice based in Dubai. Get his thoughts on this. Good morning, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm doing well, John. How are you doing?
I am fine. So we have done, I think, a couple of sessions which either have been about renunciation or touched on renunciation. Frustrating time for those who want to cut ties with the United States, isn't it?
No, it's definitely a challenging time, and especially um, coming up on the end of the end of the year here, and in my experience, a lot of people want to try to expatriate before the end of the year, right? So they don't have to another year of tax filings and compliance. And you can't get an appointment anywhere because the consulates are not accepting expatriations appointments in most parts of the world.
That is correct. With very few exceptions, I have only had three or four people actually renounce since I guess March, and a couple in Canada. Let's see, where else? Australia, Japan, interestingly. But by and large, they seem to have shut down the process of getting an appointment altogether. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I actually was contacted by a client whose family mostly expatriated in Slovakia, and there's a couple Americans left in the family, and there's one of them that desperately wants to get out by the end of the year. And they called every embassy in Europe uh, and could not find one that would offer them any type of appointment. And I actually had a meeting today with a client uh, from the Middle East here who also wants to expatriate and can't find an appointment anywhere in any of the embassies in the Middle East.
This is uh, this is really a bad problem. I mean, the backlog is obviously huge. There seems little doubt that the published numbers of renunciations dramatically understate the actual numbers. Uh,
Oh, that's for sure.
I mean, is this going to force a change in the process? I mean, is there some reason this can't just be done through Zoom or something?
Well, I mean, I don't see why it couldn't be. I mean, if you look at the process of giving up a green card, well, not, I suppose, not quite as serious or as drastic as giving up one's citizenship. It's a pretty straightforward process, right? You fill out an I-407, you sign it, you mail it in, and you're basically done. Um, I don't understand why you couldn't fill out the forms, your oath of renunciation and all that stuff, and sign it in front of a notary public and mail it in.
Why do you think that giving up citizenship is somehow more dramatic than giving up a green card? I mean, what they both have in common is that in both cases, you're giving up the right to live and work in the United States, and that's the primary thing you're giving up, right?
Well, I think that that's a very logical way of looking at it, and that's certainly the way that I would look at it, the way I do look at it. Um, but I think when it actually comes to uh, giving it up, I think there's an emotional component to it that I've noticed with a lot of my clients over the years that have expatriated or at least have considered it and then in the end not done it. Um, and that is that the United States, through its propaganda of the being the greatest country on earth, the land of the free and the home of the brave, and that it's been the beacon of hope and land of opportunity. Um, I noticed that it's very emotional for people to give up their citizenship, even when it's only harming them, right? Like it's not doing them any good. And I haven't seen that with any other nationality. I know people that have, given up European citizenship for another European citizenship, or given up, uh, whatever, any other citizenship than American citizenship, and it's kind of done, without any real uh, uh, emotions about it. It's looked at from very logically, but um, my experience with Americans is a very emotional decision. They're very attached to it for no logical reason. And the reason why I say that it's a more drastic step giving up the citizenship than a green card from a legal perspective, I guess, um, it may not be more drastic, but from the emotional standpoint, I think it is.
Well, citizenship is I've come to see primarily an issue of identity. Um,
Yeah,
it's hard for Americans. I think they grow up in school every morning with the Pledge of Allegiance and all this sort of stuff. Which, I mean, when you think about it, is really quite dramatic, isn't it? Imagine every morning pledging allegiance to a government in a country.
yeah, no, I mean, it was. I mean, I think about this. Know this about me, but I did my through the fourth grade. I mean, kindergarten all the way through the fourth grade. I did outside the United States, and the first time I entered an American, school was in fifth grade, and I was shocked by this whole Pledge of Allegiance thing, and I really I really wasn't. I didn't understand it, and I really wasn't on board for it. I just, even at a young age, I just thought this was a ridiculous thing. Um, but I was, you're forced to do it. I was forced to say the words and put my hand over my heart. They don't give you much choice.
Yeah, yeah, and we see this played out in sort of. I don't know if are you an NFL football fan at all, or uh,
Not really,
not
because
hugely,
of
but
growing up.
you may be aware of the last couple years. This issue of kneeling and some the players kneeling
Yeah,
in some of these games, etc., which really is quite an amazing thing.
yeah, yeah, I did catch
Particularly
that.
in a country where we have the First Amendment that guarantees freedom, that at least supposedly guarantees freedom of expression, right?
Supposed to.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. But there is no doubt that uh, citizenship generally, I think, is an identity issue. I think particularly so with the United States.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's definitely harder, I think, for Americans to give up citizenship. But you make the point earlier. You say even when it's harming them. I
yeah.
mean, how's American citizenship harming people these days?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways that it harms people. I mean, I think the biggest examples that probably the best examples that I can give is, especially if you look at people who live in Europe. And I'm not talking about super wealthy people. I'm talking about people that are lived ordinary lives, and um, or live ordinary lives, and they're part of, many of them. Listen, if you have dual citizenship with the US and an EU country like Austria or Germany or France or something, I mean, your other citizenship other than the United States is a first world citizenship that comes with tremendous social benefits, right? From pensions to medical care to, va- super vacations that you're legally entitled to from the, you know, that your employer is supposed to give you. Um, and these people, live in Europe. They getting all these benefits from the government where they're living from, and then they have this. Many of them haven't lived in the U.S. for decades. Their family and everything is based in Europe. They have no intent to go back, and they have this U.S. citizenship that's one they're having to pay a lot of money to comply with in terms of tax returns. I mean, it's good business for me, but I feel bad for the people. Um, Two, they're precluded from investing in a lot of different investments. because they won't accept Americans because of FATCA and the U.S. tax issues revolved around that. A lot of banks don't want to deal with them, and a lot of investment companies don't want to deal with them. And if you do get to make some investments, they're usually taxed very harshly, right? I mean, even like a lot of private pension plans and things like this that are tax advantaged in the country where the person's living is treated very harshly by the United States from a tax perspective. And so I think those are the ways in which the citizenship is really disadvantaging and harming them.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would go so far as to say that I think that U.S. citizenship in the 21st century, unless you live in the United States, I think U.S. citizenship is actually a disability.
I mean, it's I mean, it's not it's not a benefit. Um, the only people that I really know, if you're somebody whose life is outside the United States, and your center of vital interest is out of the U.S. and you don't have any plan to go back to live in the U.S. Maybe you never lived in the U.S. I think the only places where that I've seen where it kind of makes sense is if your other citizenship uh, doesn't allow for easy travel, right? I know a lot of people from certain Middle East countries and Asian countries, um, this is some South American countries that are dual citizens, and they keep the U.S. citizenship simply so that they can travel freely, and for them, the monetary cost of having that is worth it, apparently.
Well, I think that that is probably true. I mean, a U.S. passport is, while it's far from the best passport in the world, it's certainly better than a lot of passports. So
Yeah,
that would definitely make sense. In fact, that's about the only thing at this point that I think makes sense. But it is an identity issue, and people are different. So right now we've got this indescribably cumbersome process. I mean, leaving aside the cost of this, right? This
yeah.
indescribably cumbersome process. If you were advising the State Department, how would you design a renunciation process that made sense?
Well, I think, look, when I renounced, it was sort of um, a two-step process, right? And I think a lot of embassies do it this way. So step one is you fill out all your paperwork and you email it to them. They then do a phone interview, to make sure you understand what you're doing, and um, you understand what the consequences are and all that stuff. Uh, they make any suggested corrections or whatever to your forms, and then you actually have the appointment. And when you go in, they kind of have the whole interview out of it, and they basically ask you, do you understand what you're signing, and what the consequences are? And you say yes, and you sign and you leave. So I think that you very much could do it in the same way remotely, right? You send in your paperwork, you have the interview, um, you go sign the documents, then in front of a notary public, and you mail them in. They process it, and you get your CLN.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, there's no reason why this cannot be done through Zoom or some form of video conferencing.
I mean, that's certainly an option as well. I mean, to me, whether it's intentional or not, it's obvious. It's almost to me like sort of the way they're doing it is kind of like a backdoor ban on expatriations, right? Um, and it'll be interesting to see if and when they start making it readily a process that's readily available again.
Do you think that there is a possibility that this will go on for an indefinitely long period of time, years, for example?
I mean, I think it could. I mean, I think when you look at it from the U.S.'s standpoint, um, I've always kind of looked at it from the standpoint that each American citizen is sort of like, you know, a little savings account for the U.S. government, right? Um, and so for them, there's a lot, not always, um, a lot of the American officials and in the government look at it sort of as unpatriotic, and they're not like a fan of this whole like expatriation process. They look down on the people that do it. So I don't see it as something that's going to be super high priority to restart. Um, and I think it's possible, uh, if they were to, I mean, this is maybe kind of a long shot, but I mean, this is a perfect way if they make they raise taxes and all this stuff, and make the rules more unfavorable, even if you're an American abroad. That you just keep those people from expatriating, so you can collect that tax. And I think this is a perfect way to do it without having to change the law, right?
Yeah. If you look at the exit tax rules and you look at the people who are covered expatriates, it's pretty clear that the U.S. is requiring the exit tax of people where they think they're losing money by the person expatriating.
Yeah.
It's as though, if you're not a covered expatriate, we really don't care. Go for it. You know, the government's
Yeah,
not.
that's true. That's a very good observation. I would agree. I would agree with that.
But you look at the other stuff, and particularly the most glaring one is if your average U.S. tax is at this point I think it's about $170,000 per year
Yeah.
over 5 years. I mean, that's just a clear statement that hey, we're losing money if you renounce.
Yeah.
And of course, as ridiculously low as the 2 million net worth thing is, and it's not even indexed to inflation, it's clearly
Yeah.
requiring an exit tax of people who have at least some assets,
I mean,
even if they're not.
I do have to say I agree with your statement, right? They want money from the people who are leaving. Uh, that being said, I am a bigger fan of this exit tax regime than the prior regime that you had this 10-year leash on you. Um, at least this you kind of pay and you're done, and unless you have U.S. heirs.
Well, yeah, and that of course a huge problem, right? Just for anybody listening, I understand that if you're a covered expatriate and then you leave a gift or bequest to a U.S. person, it's the only case where it's the recipient of the gift who pays a tax, and that's I think roughly it's at current gift tax rates, which would be like 40%. So
Yeah.
this is why
Um,
we have the family expatriation.
exactly. I just, this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's an interesting thing to add, where you've said that this is the only situation where the recipient pays the gift tax. I don't know if you saw this recent court case that came out. Not, I mean, it's just a few weeks ago, where a federal district court, or maybe it was a tax court, I don't remember, but a court ruled that if the donor, so the person giving the gift, doesn't pay the gift tax, that the recipient is personally liable for the tax, um, on the gift up to the full amount of the gift.
No, I did not. That's unbelievable.
I'll see if I can find the article and send it to you. But yeah, this is brand new. This came out like a couple weeks ago, or at least I read it a couple weeks ago. But it's brand new, and that's obviously a drastic change from what it's been for my entire professional career, which has been the recipient, or sorry, the donor is responsible for it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the Internal Revenue Code, clearly puts the liability for the gift tax on the donor, not the donee. So it'd be interesting to see what the reasoning was to somehow make the donee responsible for the tax if the
Yeah.
donor doesn't pay. But none of this really surprises me. Um, it would seem to me that at the present time, if one were to ask, what does it mean to be a U.S. citizen? It means taxation, forms, and penalties, basically.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, if you're in a, if you know if you're if it, I mean it's interesting that the rest of the world, especially in Europe, they view the U.S. as such a low tax country, um, and it it's kind of its reputation, but it's just not. I mean, by the time you figure the income taxes and payroll taxes and gift to the state taxes and excise taxes and sales taxes and state taxes and local taxes and city taxes. It's a very high tax country.
yeah, I agree. I agree with you completely on that. I live in Canada, and there's this sort of general perception that somehow taxes are lower in the United States, and um, that is not the case. Um,
No,
when you start adding all these things together, people, if you compare the rate of federal taxes,
yeah,
it may be that those are lower, but the problem is that that's only one component of what's a massive, massive uh, bureaucratic tax regime. And then, of course, the compliance costs in the United States far outweigh anything in any other country, or at least any other country that I'm aware of.
no. I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, when I see tax returns from clients, in their home country, and I'm talking about very wealthy clients. I mean, it's a few pages. Um,
Well, interestingly, I was looking at a return from, a very pedestrian middle class person uh, with basically just a job living outside the United States. I was looking at this return a couple of days ago. It was 180 pages.
yeah,
180 pages.
yeah. Yeah, I once had a case where we did the returns for a guy. He lived in the U.S., but he had a lot of overseas companies and bank accounts and businesses, and it hadn't been properly reported, and so we had to go in and correct it. And by the time we were done, I think that it was one and a half bankers boxes full of documents that got shipped to the IRS.
Oh, it's incredible. It's without a doubt. Well, the truth of the matter is, the Internal Revenue Code has really not been amended in any significant way since I think the 50s.
Yeah,
And it's like a horrible website, that started out in the 90s, and has been tweaked a bit here and there, and that's it. And there's no integration, right, of all of these different kinds of taxes. So you never know what you're omitting, and most people are omitting something through no fault of their own. It would seem to me that the first requirement of a rational tax system is that people should know what's required of them. And
it's impossible
yeah,
in the U.S.
I mean, when the history of the United States is written, I think they'll probably have a chapter on each of the prominent forms.
I wrote a blog that come out in the next couple weeks, but one of the things that I wrote in there is, the U.S. tax system, the IRS is so notorious that it doesn't matter where in the world you go, Dubai, Europe, wherever you go, the people, the locals in that country know about the IRS. Other than maybe Canada, because you live there and you're in the tax industry, how many people in America can name, or anywhere in the world can name, the tax agency of another country?
Well, I think you make a good point, but I would add to that I think the Internal Revenue Code has replaced the Constitution of the United States as the unofficial Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly, the most powerful organization, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
without a doubt.
I don't know why the United States even bothers, to send the military to Afghanistan and Iraq. Why don't they just send a bunch of IRS auditors?
Yeah, I mean, they'll strike the fear of God into people.
Exactly. I mean, who cares about the military? It's the IRS. Well, And I think it makes perfect sense because, the way the Internal Revenue Code actually works is that Section 1 says all individuals are subject to worldwide taxation. All individuals, it doesn't even say humans, all individuals.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world, the galaxy, your dog, your parrot, subject to worldwide taxation. The only exception is if you're a non-resident alien. So why not just, send IRS auditors all around the world? If people can't prove they're a non-resident alien, shake them down for their money.
Right. I mean, if you want, if you want to get Iraq on track, for example, just install the IRS there to start taxing people.
Well, what about just making all Iraqi citizens U.S. citizens and therefore subject to the U.S. tax system?
You know what? They would be begging for Saddam Hussein back.
All right. Well, on that note, let's wrap up this discussion. That definitely the latter part, I think, does have, as amusing as it may be, has some degree of truth. So this is John Richardson. I'm speaking with Jimmy Sexton in Dubai. And again, Jimmy, how would people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we have two companies. One is my general U.S. tax compliance and an advisory business, which is Esquire Group. You can find us at esquiregroup.com. Contact us at info@esquiregroup.com. For wealth planning, my private client practice is called JS Private Advisory. You can find us at jsprivate.com or email us at concierge@js.
All right, that's great. Thanks very much. And we'll certainly pick this up again. Again, this is John Richardson. I'm speaking with Jimmy Sexton of the Esquire Group, who is based in Dubai. Thank you very much.